Michael Hudson, what do you see, Dr. Hudson, what do you see as the short-term prospects for this country the next 2-3 years in all probability?
Well, every recession lasts normally about 2 years. So this talk of green sprouts is just plain silly. Not only are we in the most serious downturn since the Great Depression, but the debt situation is so much heavier. The dollar situation is so much worse, especially with the meetings yesterday and today in Russia, that the depression is going to get much worse, and for many people, it means they're facing a lifetime of debt.
And so we're looking at something that may well be worse than the Great Depression, because at least during the Great Depression, America was a creditor nation. There was no doubt that our money was the reserve currency of the world, and we were not importing oil.
Well, also, as you pointed out in your book, Screwed, during the Great Depression, Roosevelt at least was trying to solve things by the government undertaking infrastructure spending and regulation.
Yeah.
And right now, the states and cities don't have the money for infrastructure. They're strapped, and what they're doing is selling off, just the opposite of what Roosevelt did. They're selling off the roads, selling off the airports to private investors that are going to essentially turn the American economy into a toll booth economy.
Right.
And people are going to have to pay for what they used to get is subsidized services at cost from the public sector. Not only that, but the cost is going to include interest charges, exorbitant executive salaries, capital gains, freely created debt that the government wouldn't have on its own balance sheet. So the cost of public services is going to double and eat into most people's spendable income.
Yeah, case in point, in Chicago, Mayor Daley privatized the parking meters in the city. He got $1.4 billion of short-term money, and now the cost of parking in Chicago has gone up fourfold.
That's exactly right.
So, you know, for example, we have just a couple minutes left here. We're talking with Dr. Michael Hudson, research professor of economics at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, the author of Super Imperialism and the Myth of Aid, among others. His website, michael-hudson.com.
Michael-Hudson.
Hyphen.
Yep.
Hyphen, yeah.
Hyphen, not a dash.
I said dash.
Right.
I guess, okay. Michael-Hudson and .com. What, you know, the solution, you know, that I see is to have the Treasury Department acquire the Fed, and for us to stop issuing money based on interest, but just start issuing money.
That would work quite simply. There's no reason why it couldn't do that. And in fact, before 1913, the Treasury did all of these things.
Right, but there are, you know, outside of Dennis Kucinich and I think Ron Paul, if I have this right, outside of a very, very small number of members of Congress who actually understand the economics of this, when you say to the average person, you know, we need to basically nuke the Fed, I mean, you know, I don't mean physically, but, you know, absorb the Fed into the Treasury Department, they look at, their eyes glaze over. They have no idea what you're talking about. How can this be made into a political solution, or what kind of political solutions are there? Or do we just have to wait for things to get so bad that people will look for these more, what they now consider to be esoteric solutions? We have about a minute left, Dr. Hudson.
People have to begin looking at the debt issue that's left out of account, and if they look at the debt and they look at the concentration of wealth and the money going for debt service, and what's exacerbating the depression is a debt deflation, they'll see that we don't need to pay this debt to the private creditors of the public sector. They can simply look at economic history, and even Milton Friedman said that the Fed could be simply a single desk inside the Treasury Department, and that's all that's needed. All over the world, the treasuries have done what the Fed does today, except the Fed acts as the lobbyist, basically, for the commercial banking sector. And,
who are robbing us blind.
Regulated. That's correct.
Yeah, and so step one is to stop the banks from robbing us blind, but they have all our politicians, many of our politicians in their pockets, some notable exceptions like Mr. Kucinich. Dr. Michael Hudson, michael-hudson.com is his website. Check it out. Dr. Hudson, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Thom.
Good speaking with you.